Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to start the recording. So hopefully it should record. Yeah, I've had a message to say it has started recording. So good evening, members. This is the meeting of the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting this evening. The Chair has asked me to advise on some housekeeping issues, and in the main it's to do with the fact that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on the Council's website for archive purposes for anybody to see after the meeting. Could I please ask all speakers who wish to speak, could they please use the reaction emojis at the top of the screen, please, the raise your hand function, which will actually show whether you want to speak or not. And then if you are invited to speak by the Chair, would you please turn your camera on for the benefit of those viewing at home? And if there are any issues with regarding to your laptop or connections during the meeting, could you please contact Democratic Services or let us know in the chat function as soon as you can. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Karen. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
I haven't been given any, Chair.
OK, I'm going to put Catherine Yanucci's in, please. I know that she's had an accident and I don't know how well she is, so I'll just pop those in.
I wasn't sure, Chair, if I could use somebody else in the background. I don't know if there was anybody else.
I haven't seen anyone else's hand go up, and I'm monitoring that at the moment. Anyone else? No. OK, let's start then, please. So appointment of the Honorary Vice Chair from the representatives of the voluntary sector. Do we have Hayley or Linda or Rachel here, please? I don't think we have anyone from the joint voluntary sector here, do we?
Would you like me to put that on the agenda for the next meeting then, Chair?
Yes, roll it over, please. Thank you.
Thank you. OK,
minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February. Now, there's going to be a limited number of people here who are actually at that meeting. So I'm going to propose those as a true record. I don't know if there's anyone else there. Jane, you happy to second that? Excellent. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest, please? Item 4. No? Good. Moving swiftly on then, please. So we've got two reports. Sorry, Susan.
Chair, apologies. I couldn't get my hand up quickly enough. So just to make a declaration of interest in relation to agenda item 5, cost of living support for food, warm spaces and other means of support. The report references the Vale Food Bank. So just to declare a personal interest, I don't need to leave the meeting for that agenda. I'm a trustee of the food bank. Thank you.
OK, thank you very much. Right, OK, so we're going for the report to the Chief Executive. The first one is the cost of living support for food, warm spaces and other means of support. And Tom is here and is going to fill us in on that, please. So are you going to talk or have you got a presentation?
I'm going to talk this evening, if that's OK with you.
No, it's absolutely fine. I was just wondering if you needed me to come off screen, that's all.
No, all good, thank you. And good evening, Chair, good evening, committee. Thanks for taking the first of the two reports this evening. This report has got in Appendix A a more detailed report that we took to the Council's Cabinet, and we've also recently taken through Homes and Safe Scrutiny Committee and also to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. We thought it would be useful to bring it to your committee, Chair. Particularly welcome any comments, observations or suggestions about how we may want to work more with the voluntary sector in this important area of work. So in terms of what I was going to just quickly run through, we've got some background information to the work we've been doing on tracking the cost of living, an update in terms of work that was done last financial year in supporting people predominantly around access to food, and then some details of some grant funding streams that we've been managing and the Council's Warm Spaces initiative. Elected members will be obviously well aware of the economic challenges facing the UK, Wales and the Vale of Glamorgan. Since the beginning of COVID, we've been tracking the impacts of changes in the economy on society within the Vale of Glamorgan, and we've produced a number of different impact assessments which have previously been reported to the Council's Cabinet and shared quite widely with all elected members and the Public Services Board. We've also undertaken in the last year the wellbeing assessment as part of the PSB's 5-year cycle of work, and what that's done is be able to shine a light on what's happening in the Vale of Glamorgan. And we've certainly seen over the last couple of years that food insecurity is increasing and is being further exacerbated by the current cost of living crisis. As I say, we've got data at the Vale of Glamorgan level drawn from a range of different sources, and there's some links to those pieces of work rather in the report itself. In the Vale of Glamorgan, we've been supporting a number of different food projects over the last couple of years. They range from big box voids, predominantly operated out of schools, which are on a pay-as-you-can model, alongside work that the Vale Food Bank are doing to provide people with crucial crisis support. We were pleased that in the 2021-22 financial year, we were able to receive funding from Welsh Government via the WLGA to support food insecurity work through the EU Transition Fund and also the Household Support Fund. And that was about £100,000 that allowed us to support 10 local food support organisations, and that included a number of schools, the Food Pod in Penarth run by our housing team, as well as the Vale Food Bank itself. In addition to providing that funding, my team in the Corporate Resources Directorate produced about 1,200 food and essential hygiene parcels that we distributed through a range of different council services, as well as through partners like Llamai, Pobl, Hafod, Atalafro and the Woolwich as well. So that's what was happening last year. And then in the spring of this year, I brought together a group of colleagues from across the organisation because I was conscious that lots of activity goes on in the organisation, but I wanted to make sure that we had the right focus and strategy to take this forward. And the first piece of work that group did was starting to look at the cost of living scheme, which Welsh Government made available. The mandatory scheme, part of that scheme was £150 paid to all residents paying Band A to D council tax and those who were in receipt of council tax reduction. We were then able to design a discretionary element to the cost of living scheme. We targeted that at those people who we felt may have fallen through the gaps in the mandatory scheme, or those people who are most impacted by the cost of living crisis. And over 36,000 households in the Vale of Glamorgan have been supported by that scheme. Work is underway currently as well to distribute the £200 payments of the winter fuel scheme, which is paid on behalf of the Welsh Government. The report makes reference to about 8,500 people having received their payment and a further 950 or so being processed currently. Then the report goes on to provide to you, Chair, a breakdown of the different funding streams that have been made available that we've been able to access in this area of work over the last 9 months or so. That totals about £166,000 worth of funding across a variety of different streams. As at last week, we'd expended or provided to other organisations about £159,000 of that funding. And today we had receipt of the £97,000 food partnership funding. So that was agreed and has been provided by Welsh Government. So work is now underway to look at how we work with our colleagues in the University Health Board's public health team on Food Vale to allocate that expenditure over the next year. The report talks about the different ways in which we've utilised that funding. So, for example, in making a contribution to the Vale Food Bank in terms of additional food stocks, but also in supporting the purchase of another vehicle. We've also been looking at working with the Pencoitra School Cluster to support a community initiative to increase the ability of the community to come and access food, and also some activities to tackle isolation. So there's a huge amount going on there. In terms of particular support over the winter, elected members will be aware of the Croeso Cynnes Warm Welcome Scheme, which has been established to create a network of spaces across the county, each offering as a minimum a warm welcome, access to a warm drink, and then a variety of different activities, which could be arts, crafts, talks. It could be childcare or activity for parents and their children. So a range of places that people can access right across the county. And members will be aware that there's a warm welcome web page on the council's website. It's got an interactive map showing people where their nearest warm spaces are, and allows people to search for activities that are close to them and of interest to them. Excuse me. And there are currently 33 of those across the county, with us in talks with other providers to increase that further. I mentioned earlier the Penarth Food Pod that was established by the housing team a couple of years ago. That's being used now by approximately 75 people on a weekly basis. Really pleased that good progress is being made in Llantwit Major as well. That's a project that we started during COVID, bringing together and connecting different organisations who are providing support in the town, making sure they knew who each other were, knew what services and support was on offer, and that's been a really successful project. We were pleased to have been awarded nearly £100,000 in National Lottery funding, which has allowed us to establish a More Than Food hub at CF61, the community centre that is operated by GVS. And what that's done is build on the food pantry that is operated there every week, and then twice a month now. You've got St Athens Clothes Bank, a chatty cafe, citizens advice, and various other providers coming together in order to provide support and advice to residents. I mentioned the Warm Welcome webpage on the council's website. That's part of a broader piece of work, providing information and signposting advice to residents on a range of different topics associated with the cost of living. And we're seeing that that's being well used. We're promoting it heavily through social media, but also in non-digital means, so making sure that regular press releases are going out, and we're providing posters and leaflets to various organisations that we work with to make sure that as many people are made aware of it as is possible. We're a big employer as a council, and we employ over 5,000 people. So we're making sure that we're providing information and advice to our own colleagues. We ran, for example, a cost of living webinar just before Christmas. There's a lot of information on our intranet, and committee will be aware that in the summer of 2022, Cabinet took the decision to adopt the real living wage pay rate for council staff, which is having an impact as well. The report that we took to Cabinet references a piece of work that Audit Wales have done on a national basis. They published a report in November called Time for Change, Poverty in Wales, and they've made a series of different recommendations for local authorities around our strategic approach to tackling poverty, the importance of a community leadership role for local authorities, and really understanding the experience of people who are experiencing poverty, and in order to create inclusive services. They make recommendations around how we should manage information on our website, and also how we should streamline and improve application and information services to people as well. And they highlight the importance of ensuring that all of that is done in complying with the socio-economic duty as well. So in the report that I presented to the two scrutiny committees, we presented an action plan in response to those recommendations, which the committees supported. we will now use the cost of living group that I was talking about right at the very beginning of the presentation to make sure that those recommendations are delivered upon in order to meet those and provide the support that we need to do. And then just finally, in conclusion, the council is taking this area of its work very seriously. There are 3 critical challenges which have been identified in the draft annual delivery plan, which will be considered again after the consultation by Cabinet shortly. Of those 3 critical challenges, cost of living is the first and the most immediate challenge, alongside Project Zero and organisational resilience. It also features very heavily as part of the Public Services Board draft wellbeing plan that's currently being consulted upon. The consultation finishes at the end of this week, and again there are commitments in there to the public and third sector working together to tackle deprivation in the Vale of Glamorgan. So that's a really quick whistle-stop tour through quite a detailed set of updates, but we did think it would be useful, Chair, for your committee to consider to see if there were any suggestions or recommendations to go back to Cabinet.
Thank you, Tom. That was very detailed and very gratifying to see that so much has been done. Depressing that it needs to be done at all, but very pleasing to see how many people are pulling together to try and make sure that these accommodations are being made, across the Vale in as many situations as possible. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask if anybody else has got a comment they'd like to make, please. You need to raise a hand if you want to speak. Okay, Susan.
Yeah, so thank you, Tom. I declared an interest at the beginning of this meeting because I'm a trustee of the food bank that I set up and experience firsthand when I'm in the food bank, the crises that people are experiencing, but also see the difference that the support that's being provided through the council is making. And I'd echo the Chair's comments about how important it is to see that continued joined up approach. My question is, obviously, I don't think we have representatives from the third sector here tonight, certainly not in terms of committee members. So my question is, where are our touch points for those providers that are delivering these essential frontline services? Obviously, they're there through the partnership work, which is happening on the ground, but is there a feedback loop? Excuse me, sorry. Is there a feedback loop in terms of being able to collect information about the difference those organisations are seeing and whether there's anything more that we can do to strengthen that engagement? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bring in the idea of like having key performance indicators or whatever, but somebody at some point is going to ask us what actual difference we have made for the money and effort that we've expended. And depressing though that is, I think there has to be, at some point there needs to be some sort of measure, doesn't there? We know we're making a difference, but some people will want to be able to tick a box to show that we've made that difference. So, Tom, I don't know if you can come back on that, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it is a really important point, and I suppose there are a few things that I say in response. Firstly, there are some of the grant streams, for example, the Warm Spaces one. Welsh Government have asked for some pragmatic information to come back to them in terms of how we've used that grant. So we are working with those providers to understand some of the metrics. So some of the information about how many people are using and accessing that support. But what we've asked for is if those organisations who are providing warm spaces are able to give us some of the more qualitative case study type feedback as well, so that we can hear from those people in the Vale who are accessing those projects. And I had a conversation with a colleague from Havod who's been operating a pop-up food bank, street food information and advice in partnership with the Vale Food Bank, Citizens Advice, and various other agencies. And they were talking about the very real difference that it's made, and some of the feedback that they've had from people calling in on a Wednesday afternoon and experiencing a more joined up experience than when we're seeing important services but being operated in isolation. So there are definitely both the kind of the counting measures, but also that more about experience of people, and what that's doing is allowing us to work out what adds value and what doesn't, and what else we can add into those situations. The Audit Wales report does suggest that we should be adopting some measures of success to understand the impact that we're having, and we've got some early work that is happening as part of the PSB's deprivation piece happening within some of the central Barry area. And that again is looking at trying to bring some of the assessment and the data alive by talking to a variety of different people as well. So yeah, it's absolutely an important piece of work. In addition, as you say, Councillor Lloyd Selby, to the more formal kind of partnership arenas to be talking in.
Okay, thank you. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. Have we got an idea of how many of these actual warm spaces we have registered within the Vale that are accessible to residents, please?
I think that's in the report, actually, isn't it?
I must have missed it then.
There are lots and lots of numbers in that report, Councillor Norman. There are 33 warm spaces currently in operation across the Vale, with us in discussion with a number of different providers about potentially increasing that number there further as well.
Okay, I see that we have people who are in on the meeting who aren't actually members. If any of them would like to speak or offer an opinion. No? Okay, in that case, I'm going to thank you very much for that report. I mean, I would like us to have an update whenever our next meeting is, because obviously this is a problem that's going to be with us. And the warm spaces possibly, we won't need them so much perhaps after April, seeing what the winter's like. But the food poverty, I think, is going to continue for some time, isn't it? I can't see us coming out of that for years. Quite honestly, I don't see what is going to change in our situation to improve it. So thank you very much for that. And perhaps we could have a chat at the end of the meeting about when you would be able to offer us some kind of update. And can we move on, if there's no other comment, to the Project Zero update, please? Thank you, Tom. I know it's you again.
No problem at all. I mentioned that there were 3 critical challenges. Here's the second of the 3, and this report, Chair, it has been produced and reported most recently to the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee. It's also been to Environment and Regeneration Committee as well, and it provides the regular update on the Council's decarbonisation programme, which is called Project Zero. Project Zero is intended to contribute to the public sector being net zero by 2030 and Wales by 2050. So it does both of those things. The report is at Appendix A, and there's also an appendix to that appendix, which is a very detailed step-by-step update that will be coming onto the Council's Cabinet shortly. Project Zero is managed through a challenge plan of which has got 3 areas and 18 different challenges. The first of those areas is around demonstrating strong leadership. So that's the Council leading by example. So it talks about the communications, engagement, evidence, data and ambition that we have as an organisation. The second area is around fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations. And that's really about where the organisation has an influence on others through our services, our policy direction, and how we can encourage behaviour change. And the third of the areas is around making a difference now, and that's got more of an internal focus, how we operate as an organisation, as an employer, how we manage our buildings and our land, for example. The report provides an update against each of the 18 challenges. It's at the request of the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee, highlights the progress that has been made since the last report in the summer. It goes on to talk about some of the challenges and barriers that exist in order to reach those challenges. And we'll be looking to further develop the format of the report so that we can be more easily or more readily showing the status of progress. But there's been quite a lot of work underway in terms of Project Zero since the summer. In terms of demonstrating strong leadership, for example, the Council has continued to contribute to community conversation events in Llantwit Major and Penarth, many of those organised by the voluntary sector or by community groups. We're developing more interactive Project Zero web pages that will launch now in the next few weeks. The intention of those is to enable organisations across the Vale and residents to be able to access and input information about climate change reduction. And we're also, as I mentioned, currently consulting on the Public Services Board Wellbeing Plan. That contains a commitment to a greener Vale, and we've just concluded the annual delivery plan consultation for the Council, which again has got this focus within it. In terms of fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations, there are a number of different things underway, predominantly work in planning around the local development plan refresh, a new green infrastructure plan being developed, as well as the active travel network maps having been approved recently by Welsh Government, with a number of different schemes being progressed across the Vale. We've undertaken work to install new electric vehicle charging points across car parks in the Vale. Some work is underway to consider pilots for doing so on street, and we've also been installing them at the Alps Depot and the civic offices recently, with the civic offices due to go live in the next few weeks. Public consultation has been concluded on a draft waste strategy, as well as installing automatic water reader meters within council buildings in a bid to ensure that we are reducing the amount of water that is leaking from our buildings. And we've managed to secure some funding through Ystadau Cymru, which is the Welsh Government's assets group. And that study is going to be looking at decarbonising potential of the portfolio of 22 community centres, as well as the 2 buildings that are leased out to GVS. So we'll be undertaking some surveys of those buildings to identify works that could potentially be delivered in order to reduce the carbon footprint of those particular parts of the portfolio. And in terms of the challenges around making a difference now, a new procurement policy and strategy have been drafted. They've got those documents have got a strong emphasis around community benefits, as well as sustainable procurement. So they'll be being reported to Cabinet in the next couple of months. Work is underway to install hybrid heating systems within council houses. About 40 have been done so far. And the report also talks about a range of different activities within the council's schools estate as well. We are focusing in terms of our impact of Project Zero on where the council's emissions are concentrated, and in the latest return to the Welsh Government that all public sector organisations contribute to, it was identified that nearly 90% of our emissions were in what is described as Scope 3, and Scope 3 is in effect within our supply chain. Scopes 1 and 2 are where there's more direct impact or influence by the organisation. And what that does is demonstrate the both scale of the challenge, but the importance of how we work with other organisations, whether that's the third sector or the commercial sector in the provision of our services. So work is underway now to do a deeper, more analytical dive into those areas of the organisation's work in order to look at opportunities to reduce carbon. But we're aware that the council is only one part of the county's emissions, and in order to better understand the different emissions by sector, we've commissioned a report to be presented to us now in the next month, which is an in-depth study showing county-wide the emissions by different sectors. We've received an initial draft of that report, Chair, and we've gone back to the consultants we're working with a few queries, and we're going to be reporting that with the next set of reports to the 2 scrutiny committees and Cabinet later on this year. We're currently consulting on the council's budget, Project Zero in terms of reserves and also in terms of revenue funding features throughout the council's financial strategy, and the report talks about a significant amount of work that is underway across the schools estate, the housing estate, as well as within the council's sort of corporate portfolio as well. And it breaks down at the request of a committee member at Corporate Performance and Resources, the structure of the reserves as they currently are. And when I presented the report last week, I made reference again to the draft budget out for consultation, which again has a series of proposed use of reserves to support this area of work. I mentioned that it's part of Project Zero is part of the annual delivery plan and part of the Public Services Board draft wellbeing plan. Importantly, the voluntary sector, the third sector, are part of the PSB and contribute significantly to the work of that board, and will be part of delivering the wellbeing plan as well. The report recommended that an update is provided every 6 months to the 2 scrutiny committees and Cabinet, and we will be looking to take the next one just ahead of the recess in the summer. That's a really quick overview of that report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, that was very comprehensive, Tom. I'm very impressed with your ability to pull out relevant details from a huge report like this. So absolutely loads of stuff going on, like covering all the departments of the council. Again, very gratifying to see so many people really committed to implementing Project Zero and pushing this project forward. So thank you very much for that. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment or has a question, please? No? Okay, well, I know this has already been to 2 committees, and obviously I don't go to those committees, so I'm grateful for the fact that you've offered us this update. Susan.
Sorry, I don't know why my laptop is slow to respond when I'm trying to raise
Just
my hand
wave at me, it's fine.
Yes, I need to, don't I? So thank you, Tom, for providing such a comprehensive summary and update on the report, which I've read with interest. If I've understood you correctly, did you say that kind of the phase 3 or part of the approach is going to be trying to understand where emissions are coming from across different sectors? Yes, okay. So I also note that we've got a new procurement policy and strategy with a stronger emphasis on the need to ensure this is embedded in the working practice, presumably of organisations we contract with. So how do those 2 things join up? Because I would imagine that once we actually get the response in terms of the pressures we see other sectors are facing, some of which we'll be contracting with and purchasing from at a significant level. So how are we going to get that balance between wanting to drive that change and also recognising the real pressures that they're facing, and then reflecting that within our procurement strategy so that we're kind of pushing where we need to push, but recognising pressures where we need to recognise those pressures? I'm just going to say I realise that's a huge challenge, trying to balance all of that, Tom.
But I think balance, Councillor, is exactly the right word, because what we are trying to do is a number of things through the draft procurement strategy. Importantly, is to support Vale of Glamorgan businesses. It will be around supporting community benefits, so understanding the wider impact of purchasing with an organisation can involve skills development and training, job growth, that kind of thing, as well as then the environmental impact as well. And sometimes those things are a balance. Sometimes those things are entirely complementary in terms of buying local and having a reduced impact on the environment. But one of the things we've taken a little bit of time to bring the procurement policy forward, because at the moment we're road testing it with a number of the council suppliers. We wanted to get some early feedback before we brought it more formally out into the public domain. And one of the things that we're talking to those suppliers is about is, depending on the size and complexity of their organisation, our expectations may be different in terms of the extent to which they're actually able to demonstrate or make a contribution to certain areas of the policy. So if they are a smaller business, we don't want to put unnecessary barriers in place that they may just not be in a position to be able to do. Whereas actually, if it's a large organisation, our expectation may be, in terms of Project Zero, that they will have decarbonisation policies and strategies and will be working towards those targets. So I guess it's a balance across a number of potentially competing or complementary areas, but also recognising that different organisations will be in a different position to be able to meet those challenges. So it's trying to balance those two layers, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody else got a comment or a question they'd like to ask? I'm aware that there are people on this in this meeting who aren't actually members, so I wondered if they had something they wanted to contribute. No? Okay, in that case, thank you very much, Tom. No, Ian Buckley, in you come.
Sorry, Tom, I was just going to say, if we do manage to sort out that balancing act, if we trademark it, we're never going to have any financial troubles again for the council, because that's going to be one heck of a job, and I don't envy that one bit, mate. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'd all echo that. Okay, I haven't. Thank you very much for that, Tom. I think we can let you go at this point if there are no other questions or comments. And thank you to everybody else for attending. Karen, if you could stay on the call at the end, please, I'd be very grateful. Everybody else, thank you very much for coming. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Amy, if you could let me know when the streaming's finished. Thank you.